Hi everybody, we are here with David Kupferman. We are in a very beautiful neighborhood in kind of older town of San Francisco. Behind us we can see the Pyramid Building, so very nice place. Thank you for invitation.
Yeah.
And David is a strategic tax ninja, right?
I'm sorry?
Strategic tax ninja, visit advisor,
Yes.
as well as judge at the pitching events. And David also helped many companies to raise millions in venture funding. So shall I add something to introduce you better, or?
Just in a nutshell, I am a CPA, or sometimes in Europe it's called a chartered accountant. I've also been controller and CFO of companies that were venture capital backed, both in the US and also in other countries. So I've helped companies from Belarus, from Hungary, Indonesia, Philippines, and other countries too. Unlike many CPAs, I have, originally I was at KPMG, a global firm, but I've also been, even though I have my own practice, I've also been in the CFO seat, controller seat, where I've helped raise money for our company. So it's from cradle, from when it's a baby, sometimes to grave. Sometimes we need to take a gun and shoot the baby also. So I've seen the whole cycle. Yeah. And so the first website ever sold, they were my client. So I've seen a lot here, and there's been some interesting developments over the last 15, 20 years here.
So you have many international experience, obviously, and so you probably met many foreigners coming to Bay Area, Silicon Valley. So my first question is if you can identify any patterns which could be typical for startups from Europe, Asia, Latin America, or North America, but outside Silicon Valley.
Some patterns. The patterns in terms of what?
In terms of how do they approach business, maybe what type of business they usually do, how they fit into the culture, what could be like mistakes, advantages.
Well, there's different, early on, well, what I used to go, you've perhaps heard of Wired magazine. A lot of the early brains out of Wired magazine, they became clients and they went on to create very successful companies. Around the time of Wired magazine, when that started, then there was another venture capital, very exciting magazine called The Red Herring, which after the dot-bomb, a number of years after that, they went out of business. But they used to have put on very high-end venture capital networking meetings. And I would go to those. It cost like $3,000 to go. It was not cheap. But they were very nice. You met a very high level of people. But back then, we would see, out of all the countries, we would see mostly Americans. And then we would see some Canadians, and then we would see Israelis. So really the largest foreign contingent were the Israelis. I mean, they are tough and they're driven. And then during and a little bit after the dot-com era, 2000 thereabouts, you started to get more companies from other countries. And then the big crash happened, and then people started outsourcing a lot in India and all that. But now more and more we see, instead of outsourcing, there's been a bit of a backlash, so that the creative IP content and design work a lot of times is happening here, and the investors do like that. So, but in terms of the patterns for different nationalities for what they're doing, it made me think early on, in terms of foreign ventures coming in and things like that. The Indians, of course, they usually would have like one or two guys. I would go down to Palo Alto on Sand Hill Road, which is the big VC area, and there would be like Silicon India. They would have a conference, a bunch of Indian guys. Then me, I was maybe one of the few white guys, but they'd usually it'd be one Indian guy, and hey, nice to meet you, sir. And then he had a whole team, like 100 or 500 people back in India. Then they had a front office. So that was interesting. That really worked well. Sometimes I have met other guys from other countries, whether it's Philippines or China or India, and they said, I would like to establish here, I'd like to get some clients here. I said, well, you got to have somebody here. So those Indians were right. They had somebody here who could be their salesperson. They've asked me, do you want to be? Well, no, I don't want to be your sales guy. You have to have somebody devoted to doing that. And depending where your clientele, if you're going after, so it depends, is it sales or are you looking for somebody on the venture side? But I did see that pattern in terms of, so sometimes if people are funded enough, then they can come here. If they have enough money, they can come here and they'll pay for, they can have enough money. They've got funding from, let's say, a parent company or maybe a parent, mom and dad, I don't know, to stay here and try to get set. It's not cheap here in San Francisco. It's not cheap. So some people are able to do that. But to come here for only 3 months, like some people do, it's, unless you're really lucky, it's, I wouldn't say impossible, but very difficult to start your engine, turbocharge your engine to really get that racing car going. Other patterns, so I do see people who think that they can do it in 3 months, but I have seen, there's just a universe of people coming from all different countries and they all have different stories, but it's better if you are coming inbound into the US if you've got a product that you've beta tested in your country. Because we are not the center of the technological world, and in different countries you have different ways of approaching and thinking of problems, and that maybe we didn't think of here. And so if you've beta tested it in your country or in your region, the fact that you've done so, then coming here, that's really good. So then the next question is, well, let's say you want to beta test here. Doing it in San Francisco is kind of crazy, as we were talking about. It might be better to do it in a slightly cheaper area. It might be Denver or Kansas or some other city. But if your needs are really to be tightly connected with VC money or certain types of technologies here, let's say you want to be highly connected with LinkedIn somehow or Twitter somehow, then, well, this is it.
So what do you think it's manageable or achievable in 1 month or 2 months?
What is?
What do you think? Like, is there any point to go for such a short period? And if you go for a short period, what do you have to do to
It depends. It depends. Like if you already have an established business and you've got 200 staff and you've got an established clientele back there, and maybe there's some global companies, and maybe you've got the great connections to come out. Oh, great! 2 months might do it. I think that's rather unlikely for most people that are watching this. But if it's somebody who just has an idea and they have a program or something and they haven't tested it at home, if they have not, then coming out here for 2 months, I think is a fantasy. 2 months, you'll learn a lot if you go to a lot of networking meetings and you meet people. And every single day here, we have so many networking meetings. And some of them are not so useful, but others are more useful. But I would say meet as many people as you can, go to as many companies as you can. Most people are very generous with their time and very open. And so you can learn a lot in 2 months. But in terms of establishing a business, in terms of getting funded in 2 months, that's insanity. I think that's highly unlikely.
So what would be the advice for these people, for founders who are coming to Silicon Valley, to focus on? What shall they do here?
In what, 2 months?
Yeah, in first 3 months, let's say.
Well, it depends, again, at what stage they are at. But if the idea is to address the U.S. marketplace, then you really need to understand the U.S. marketplace, so that if you are a company that has some new way of, let's say, distributing pet food, special pet food for your dog who's an old dog or a new puppy or something like that. That's just for your dog, and one for poodles and one for Shih Tzus, and special foods. It's better if you have beta tested it in your country. But when you come here, it's really important. Besides talking to everybody out here in adventure meetings, go to the places where you will meet people in the business, in the marketplace. Talk to the consumers. Because people here, they're just doing tech. A lot of times they don't know the market. So you have to understand then, does your product really get a feel? Does your product, if you're thinking about going into the US market, see if your product or your service, whichever it may be, if it addresses a need in the US market. And then you have to see, are they totally doing it in the US already? Maybe you're wasting your time. Then, if you have something really cool, does that technology, when you have to be market focused, you can't just have a cool technology unless it's an iPhone. Well, that's a rare exception. If it's an iPhone, the market didn't know it wanted an iPhone, but then the market did. But generally speaking, you want to look at the market and see if the market has a pain point, what we call a pain point. You have to understand that pain point. And generally people in the tech business, well, they do tech. They don't generally know a certain market, whichever market that may be. And so I'd say go out to the markets. And many times that's not necessarily people who are in tech. It might be people who are in the medical field. I have no idea. It could be in telemedicine. Okay. This is the place to really do market surveys and talk to customers, talk to the people who refer the business in, et cetera, et cetera. So in 2 months, I think you need to not only talk to tech people, but especially you have to talk to people who are not in tech. You have to talk to people who are in the market. You have to understand the market. That's if you're going to be going after the U.S. market. Now, there's another company that, the world leader in small business accounting systems is called Intuit. They make something called QuickBooks. And I have been an advisor to them for a number of years. And I had connections to their very early foundings, okay? And something dropped there. And but they have like an 80% control of the market, almost a monopoly. They're pretty good, but they've gotten fat and lazy. Now there's a New Zealand-based company that is very good, but their problem is in trying to get into the market. The question is, can they? And they're trying to get into the market. They might go public here. I invested some money, but the real question is, can they really break into this market? And that's an open question because, accounting products are accounting products. And if somebody has 80%, it's what we call a sticky product. It's hard for people to switch out of it to go to this other thing that happens to be out of Australia. It's getting pretty big globally, but it's possibly doubtful that they'll be able to do it. And I know that their desire has been to go public, but I'm not so sure that they can, because their competitor is so big and so sticky, nobody wants to leave them. So that's a simple example of when you come here, you've got to understand the marketplace and the competitive landscape also.
So like after the advice, can you come up also with some don'ts, like things to avoid or?
Oh, there's so many don'ts or so many do's and don'ts. Well, one thing is you have to be careful when you're dealing with attorneys. Attorneys coming to the U.S. and doing it legally is very very important. But when you are doing that, if you do every single thing that an attorney says, you'll go broke. Because there's so many things that have to be done. And so one of the challenges is, and I am speaking from a CFO's perspective, If you do everything that they say, you'll go broke. There's like so many things. So you have to prioritize what you'll do now and what you'll leave for later. And that is why, for instance, some people, instead of doing exactly kosher, it's kind of a dirty secret here, instead of getting their immigration visa first so that they can be working here, they come here as tourists. There's probably the vast majority of everybody working out there that are from foreign countries that are trying to set up here. They're doing just that. So it's a little gray. I think America should free it up and make it much easier for foreign entrepreneurs to come here. But it's something you'll have to be careful for. So what most people are doing, unless they really have a lot of funding right off the bat, really initially if they have a lot of funding, unless they do, then they're coming here in sort of a semi-tourist like status, and then they stay here and then they fly back home and do things like that. Therefore, in answer to your question, don't do everything that your attorney does, but listen to them carefully. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Do run your business practices very clean and honestly. In certain home countries, you can take a lot of shortcuts and you can do things not always so clean and honestly, but it's really, really important generally that you do business here really clean and upfront, and that your finances are really clean and so on. I could go on with some other, there's many do's and don'ts. Maybe if you ask me some more questions, I'll come up with them.
I would like to ask, what do you think, how long it can take to close the seed round from the first meeting with potential investor to actually signing the agreement?
Well, I think the longest thing that takes the most time is to find the seeds. You have to find the seeds. That means you have to hunt. That's not easy. You have to find those investors, whether they're angel investors or other investors. Now, if they're, say, an angel investor, they can write a check in one day if they say, wow, this is great. Now, it's going to be easier for them to write a check if you're located here. Mm-hmm. If you're going to be based here, then they can walk over and say, knock on the door and see what you're doing. But they're not going to generally speaking, they're not going to write a check and then you're going to go back home. No, highly unlikely. Now, I mean, if they're a Czech American and they go back and forth all the time, maybe. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that could be where, so they could just say, hey, this is really good, and you're really prepared, and you show them everything, they can write the check. Mm-hmm. That's why they call them angels. They fly in, and they have the magic wand, and voila, right?
Smart money.
Now, an angel can be smart money, or it can be dumb money. Sometimes you want to take dumb money, which is just an angel who doesn't really know your business. There can be reasons for that, which are good. But nonetheless, whether it's smart or dumb, they can still write a check real quick. But the real problem is finding those people. Okay? And that's not easy. That can take months, many months, a year, 2 years. But once you find them, it can happen in a day. But realistically, maybe a couple of weeks, 2 weeks, because there's probably deal docs that, generally speaking, an angel would want to have their attorney write up. You need to review it, and so on. So maybe a couple of weeks. As you go up the what we call the food chain or ladder of different types of funders, then there would be instead of an angel, there might be before angels, there would be what we call friends and family. Mm-hmm. So, of course, they'll write a check, grandma, grandmother, or your rich uncle, in your case, Igor, or somewhere like that, somebody like that. They're the quickest, but then there's an angel. And then there might be after that, they're higher up the food chain would be a venture firm. And that's a courtship that I think can take at least 6 months, really. Mm-hmm. Because they're getting so many people from all around the world, not only here, so many different technologies. First, you have to find who they are, who's investing in that business. And then you've got to knock on the door, get their attention somehow. If you know somebody who knows them, that's always good. So you have to network. That's why if you have an established business in a certain market sector, let's say that you are a leader in your country dealing with pharmaceutical, that's good. Because then you can see, okay, what VCs are investing in pharma. And then if you've done it for some big European pharma or Asian pharma, that's a great lead-in, because then you can see, okay, what VCs have been doing stuff with pharma. Oh, that's a great way to get in the door. That will make it faster. But if you're coming in cold and you're unknown and you don't have that track record, it could take a lot longer. And it's really like doing the roulette wheel, gambling. You know, the roulette wheel? Your odds are, you get ready to really do your pitch. You know, elevator pitch, it has to be 30 seconds. That's it.
If we talk about this elevator pitch and like approaching investor, what are the things they really care about? Like, are there any metrics like growth, revenues, or what shall the startup is focus on when doing elevator pitch or approaching business angel?
Well, I mean, talking about an elevator pitch really is fully is probably like at least an hour talking about it, but it's just got to talk about what's your value proposition. What I think the main points are, who are you, real quickly, but what is it that you're trying to address or deal with in terms of market pain? Because you have something that generally does not address or solve a market pain, then it's useless. So you might say that there are laws in America that say that you cannot use a cell phone when you're driving, or you can't text while you're driving. There's laws that say that, but there's no way to enforce that. Thousands, tens of thousands of people get killed every year. Insurance companies have to pay out so much money. So this is a real pain. So it addresses that market pain. Okay. So if you say, well, we've got worldwide patents on that, it's going to be, our patents will be enforced by law. If you say every major auto company will want this, will be required to have it, but we think we're worth $1 billion. That's, you've got to say it really impactful. What market pain are you talking about? And then, of course, it's just got to be a short, concise message. I liken an executive business plan summary or the pitch. You have all these details underneath it. I liken it to a pyramid, but the pitch and the executive business plan summary, it's like the very tip of the pyramid. Now, in ancient Egypt, I believe the very tip of the pyramid was golden, and it would shine in the light. But it represented everything beneath it. It was the top. But sometimes it's really hard especially for the creator of the technology or the founders, to think of it, because they're thinking about the whole pyramid. It can be hard, but it has to be done. Because if you don't pitch it properly, then you'll waste a lot of time.
I like your example with this technology that could prevent texting while driving, etc. And it arises me another question, which would be like how to make realistically your evaluation. Because sometimes you can have great idea, you have maybe patent in place, and you can make great evaluation. Sometimes you need to generate revenues or have a lot of users, customers. So how to make it realistic, if you have any tips on that?
If I have any thoughts on that? It always depends. There's no one answer. If this is an existing marketplace that has other competitors doing things differently, then it really does help if you're already running and you can prove it. Okay? Because just having some idea, hey, this is how we want to do it, most investors will say, yeah, there's a million people doing it. It's better if you've got something running. So I would say in your home country, that's a great opportunity. If it's running and you can prove it, then that's going to make it worthwhile to convince maybe even an underwriter from your home country or your uncle or somebody to pay for that check to come here. Because if you don't have that already pre-written, then it's more difficult. But if you just simply have ideas and you want to come here, I don't know. Then you're just another guy here. There's many programmers, and everybody's got ideas, and it's very nebulous or just very unknown about how long that might take. I did have an example of one of the first e-commerce. They were clients. An e-commerce company early on in the earlier .com era, and they were an internet-based e-commerce solution in a box for small business. Not a giant company, but for small businesses wanting to be online and having an online store. Their market timing was perfect. They had, I think, something like maybe $6.33 in sales. Well, they were test sales. 3 cents here, 2 cents here. That's really the extent of their sales. That was a very rare exception. They were bought, it was actually a merger, but they were bought by a large tech company. I think it was about a $50 million deal, but that's very rare. It was 2 guys, 1 garage. They had cheap sneakers and they ate top ramen for 1 year and they were programming. But they just had this thing built and the market timing was perfect. But that is sheer luck. Now, if you do go and meet the venture capitalists, many times they're very smart people. But the one thing, and they think, sometimes some of them think that they are gods, that they're God. They do drive with their Maserati, they might have a jet. And some of them are very smart. But others, the reality, and I used to go to Christmas parties. My girlfriend worked at a famous VC firm. And I'd see them, but the reality is they were lucky. So you can be a genius, you can be smart, but if you don't have the timing, then luck just doesn't look upon you. Luck doesn't shine on you. Now, in the case of that one company that had early e-commerce in a box for small companies wanting to do online stores, wow, they were lucky. And the timing was perfect, but that is very rare. But the reality is, what you always have to remember here, that the more successful ones, while they're smart, a lot of them, many of them, the reality is, not only were they smart, but they were also lucky. So you can be as smart as possible, but many times the ignored element or ingredient missing is also luck.
Interesting. My very last question, what did you learn today? What did you learn today?
What did I learn today? Here with you guys?
Could be.
What did I learn today? Well, today I was meeting this one client who, is kind of a superstar out of I'll say a movie studio, an online animation movie studio, who will be funded from overseas. And he went to a bank here, and the bank said, initially they said, no, we can't open an account. And I said, that's crazy. Of course you can. And so we called up this one very good bank that I work with and talked to some people, because I do know people. And so we got hooked in and wired with their top banking specialist to make that happen. So there it kind of proved out, to a degree I learned again, that it is really good if an investor, a new entrepreneur, in that case, if they do get good advisors, I would say that. Mm-hmm. If they get good advisors. That's one thing I sort of learned today. Mm-hmm. That's what I would say.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and we appreciate all your tips and advice.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Good luck with this.